Hey guys, Tamiya Therapist here, helping you guys to get the most out of your model kits. Today I want to show you how I use Tamiya Cement to remove seam lines and fix some mistakes we may make along the way. So without further ado, let's get over to my workstation. Alright, so here we are at my workstation. We have our Tamiya Cement, our extra thin cement, and our super glue. The way they work is that the super glue here works by adding an adhesive layer between the two pieces, while the Tamiya Cement works by melting the pieces down, allowing them to fuse together to become one piece. Super glue does not have that capability, so don't use that for this process here. When you're using the super glue, you can use it for resin kits, but for plastic here, we want to use the cement. The regular cement's great for some of the larger pieces when you're doing things like legs or when you're working on things like the arms, and the extra thin cement is going to be really good for when you want to repair V-fins or when you want to work on smaller, thinner pieces. Maybe you want to glue something in a little bit permanently, or maybe even work on things like the head. So knowing when to use it, it's a good idea to just double check what you're going to be working on and then choose the viscosity that's going to work best for you. So I'm going to jump ahead to when we have the two pieces here. I'm not going to show you how to cut them out because I have a tutorial using nippers. If you want to check out that, I'm going to leave the link up in the corner there so you can go check out that video. What you're going to need now is your plastic cement, a file, and a C-clamp. We'll talk about the C-clamp in a little bit, but the thing you want to do with the pieces here is you want to go ahead and take your file, and what you're going to do is you're going to work on the inside edges here where the two pieces are going to meet. So the reason that we're sanding the pieces that we're going to be fusing together is that it gives the piece a little bit of extra surface area for the cement to work with. Now, you can go ahead and use a file. If you don't have a file, you can just use sandpaper or a sanding sponge, whatever you have on hand. But basically, you just want to rough up the surface to make it easier to bond. So I'll get my C-clamp ready here because I'm going to go ahead and add the plastic cement to the pieces. And what I want to do is I just want to add it to the seams that are going to be touching each other. When I close them together, I want to make sure I squeeze it hard so that this plastic comes out of that seam, and then that allows it to really bond and give us a more plastic to work with on the surface when we want to go ahead and sand it down. So I'll go ahead and start adding the cement here. What I want to do is I want to use the side of the brush. I want to avoid using the tip of the brush or the end of the bristles, because if I put it straight down onto the plastic, I could push some of that cement down into the plastic. This stuff is strong enough that it could possibly start to melt it right away. Or if I'm using the tip of the brushes, I can go ahead and have some of the bristles fling a little bit of that cement, getting it everywhere. And I kind of don't want that to happen. So I'm going to go ahead and use the side of the brush. As you can see here, I'm going to go ahead and use it around the entire length of the seam. And what that's going to do is it's going to allow that plastic that's being seeped out from me squeezing it. It's going to help give that some more of the surface area of the cement to work with. So I'll squeeze it down. I'll go ahead and clamp it down so I can make sure that the piece doesn't end up falling or touching anything else. I'll put it off to the side, leave it overnight, but if you want, you can come back and check it. Ultimately, we just want to make sure that it has time to cure. Okay, so we're back after a whole night of curing. I went ahead and just left it overnight because it was really late and I didn't want to stay up an extra 4 hours just to go ahead and do the sanding video. So I went ahead and just let it cure overnight, and it's better if you let it cure too long than not long enough, because what's going to happen is if you start sanding too early, it's going to come out kind of like a gooey, kind of like a Play-Doh-y consistency, and that's not what we want. We want it to be kind of a hard plastic. So you can always kind of check it, just run your finger over it, run your nail over it to check it, make sure it's really set and that it's back to being plastic and not cement or melted plastic when you're working with it. So if that does happen, just go ahead and add a little bit more and let it cure the full time and wait a little bit longer this time. Yeah. So I'm gonna go ahead and start filing it here. And when I'm filing, I'm going slowly and I'm checking constantly. What that does is it allows me to make sure that I'm not over filing it and making sure I get just enough down where I reach the seam, but not too much that I'm taking off a lot of the plastic that's surrounding it. As you can see, I'm doing the whole heel because I want to make sure that that filing down is nice and even with the rest of the foot. It's important when you're doing the foot because you want to make sure that it has an even surface to stand on and it's not something that's uneven or unbalanced. So that's what it looks like with just the file. If you want, you can go ahead and use a sanding sponge to clean it up a little bit further. If you want to get a more even shine, you can go ahead and go with an even higher grit for the heel or even just the whole piece in general. But if you're going to paint it 600 grit, it's fine. If you want to go higher to get it back to its initial shine, I'd say go up to about 2000 or even 4000 grit when sanding. I'll go ahead and do the toe section here. And as you can see, I'm going up to the 800 grit to get it nice and cleaned up. wipe it off, just double check it and see how it's looking. If you're not painting your kit, this would be good enough. Again, if you want to get that initial shine back, you can go ahead and go a little bit higher. But again, always check your work just to kind of see how it's going. If you're going to paint your kit, you can prime it and see if there's any imperfections. Go back and then fix it from there. So to me, that looks good. I can go ahead and prime it later, but I'll do the rest of the foot a little bit. But there you have it, how you can go ahead and remove seam lines using your Tamiya plastic cement. So one of the most common things that happens in Gunpla is you're working on a piece and you accidentally snap something. Now the most common break in Gunpla is the V-fin. I don't know how many times I've broken a V-fin when just I finished the head, I put it off to the side, and I'm moving things around and things bump into the head and I snap the V-fin. It's more common than a lot of people think, and not a lot of people actually know how to repair it. So I want to show people how I do that. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to line up the piece to make sure that I know where I'm going to be putting the piece when I ultimately get the cement ready and apply it. I would highly encourage you guys to go ahead and align it first, because then that way you can be sure that when you put it on the first time, it's facing the correct way. I mean, the cement is forgiving enough that you can take it apart and then put it back together, so you don't have to worry about it too much, but it's easier to make sure that you go ahead and get it right the first time. So I'll go ahead and apply the cement to both sides, both the main body of the V-fin and the part that's been broken off. Be sure to close the cap on your Tamiya cement tightly. I don't know how many times I've heard people say that they've spilt their cement and ultimately ruined their project. So now that I've got the pieces all glued down, I'm going to go ahead and press them firmly together, make sure that they're aligned, and double check it. Now I can see that I didn't quite put it on as straight as I wanted to, and so again, you can always take it off and then start over again. But make sure that when you do add your Tamiya cement, you add enough that it starts to remelt the old cement, but also starts to melt some more of the new cement. So I'll go ahead and reapply it here, then here, and once again I'll go ahead and close it back up. Make sure I close it nice and tight, don't want to spill it. Take my time checking it, make sure I get it nice and aligned. Take your time with this, you want to make sure you get it perfect, because eventually what we're going to do is after we're done pushing it together, just like with the regular cement, it's going to seep out and we're going to want to sand it afterwards. So now that I like its alignment, I double check it, I'm happy with it, I'll go ahead and put it off to the side and let it set. The extra thin cement, because it's not as thick as the regular cement, it takes a little less time to dry up and solidify, and so what you want to do is just set it off to the side. I'd still recommend waiting longer than not long enough, so I'll put it down on top of something and make sure that it stays undisturbed, up and out of the way, so that if I'm working on something else, I don't accidentally bump that piece that's sitting to cure. So I'll leave it overnight for this part too, because again, it was late when I started working on it, and then I'll come back and show you how I sand it. So it's been overnight, and as you can kind of see as I spin the piece around, there's a little bit of plastic seeping out right where I went ahead and glued it back together, which is perfect and which is kind of what I want. So I'm going to go ahead and come back in with my metal file, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to go really, really light, and I can't emphasize how light I'm going with the file. It may look like I'm adding a lot of pressure to it, but realistically, I'm not adding any downward pressure with my index finger. I'm really just letting the weight of the file sit down on a piece and use the coarseness of the file to really catch that extra cement, and then take off the excess glue or plastic that's seeping out there. So as you can see there, I'm going really slow, really light. Again, just taking off enough that it's back to where I want it to be, constantly checking it. And go ahead and spin it around to the back. One thing you can see here is with the middle finger of the hand holding the V-fin, it's supporting the V-fin again, because the last thing we want to do is, as we're sanding it and trying to clean it up, is break it again. So make sure as you're cleaning it up, as you're sanding, as you're filing, that you always try to brace it as best you can. Sometimes it's not always possible, so you want to go ahead and get a little bit lighter when you're sanding it down, but ultimately just make sure that you support that piece. Make sure you have something behind it when you're sanding, if you're adding a little bit of force to kind of get it to come down a little bit cleaner. And so again, just take your time, always check your work, come back, look at it. Again, you don't want to go too far because you're going to risk breaking it again. Go slowly, and then after you're done with your file, you can move on up to your sponges. For the big open section, I have a large flat sponge here that I like to use, but for some of the smaller sections, I can go ahead and use a thinner sponge. The God hand sponges are a great line. I like using them. Those are my favorite when it comes to sanding down. They make the sponge is in a thinner format here, which I was using for another project, and I have having some lying around, so I can use it for the V-fin here to get under that main section, to get under that front section of the V-fin, and be able to get the rest of the part that was glued back together right underneath that part. So it's kind of a good thing that I kind of cut it so close to the main body, so you can kind of see how I get around some really tight corners and some tight places. As you can see, I can fold the sponge to give it a little bit of extra rigidity as I'm sanding without actually putting my hand behind it. And then here, as you can see, I'm sanding it, and again with that, I'm not giving it a lot of force. I'm barely just holding onto the sponge as is, and I'm just going slow. With that, I went ahead and just double checked my work, blow it off, make sure I don't see any extra residue left over. Go ahead, check your work. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and take our Tamiya Cement again, and I'm going to go ahead and brush it on top of all the length of the V-fin, just all the way down. What that does is it helps to take any of the excess that might have been sitting on the top, let it set back into the plastic there and become part of the piece again. But also what happens is, as we set this cement on top of it, it starts to bring some of that color back out. And so I'll let it set again off to the side so that it can dry. But there you have it, how you can repair a V-fin using your Tamiya extra thin plastic cement. Upon closer inspection, you can still see a little bit of that cut, but ultimately it's basically gone, and from far away, no one's really going to be able to tell that you broke the V-fin in the first place. Hey, if you appreciate the video so far, go ahead, leave a like. Let us know you found some value in the content. If you haven't done so already and you want to stay up to date on anytime I come out with a new video, be sure to hit that subscribe button and the bell notification so you don't miss a thing. Guys, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you found something valuable in this video. Take something back to take your models to that next level. Remember, take care of yourselves, take care of the people around you, and I'll see you in the next one.